history is their worst subject and they find it very boring. We tried to meet the challenge of engagement for history. And, you can't have the students every day in the national parks, of course, but one of our goals was to, the one thing we can't, that it's still around, is the setting. You know it because you work on the setting. But one of our goals is to bring the setting into every single session. And when you're working online, you can actually do that. In the brick and mortar, it's a little more difficult, but online, your professor can be in a different place that's pertinent every single time. Yeah. And that's engaging. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. It's not quite as cool as, here, handle this firearm, but maybe one step down.
We got to be careful with that too.
Yeah, of course. Anyway, should we just launch in?
Yeah, let's launch. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so a few years ago, I started a YouTube channel. So I've been teaching, and I teach at various colleges and universities. And I found that if I visited a historic site and actually took a few minutes to film myself giving a little, I call them mini lessons or mini lectures on site, and then I showed that in class, students really responded well. They like that. So I decided to make a YouTube channel I call it the Nomadic Professor. And in fact, my family and I were totally nomadic for 2 years. We were like a few days here, a few days there for 2 years. I have 4 kids. I just dragged them all around the world, and I was making these mini lectures the whole time. Before I left, I talked to Nate here. Nate is a high school teacher. He's been teaching high school for years. He has sort of a different background. I have my PhD's in history. His degrees are in English, philosophy actually, right? Philosophy with certifications in English and history. So he's been teaching it in the States. He's been teaching overseas. He's been teaching IB. What are some of the other programs you've been teaching overseas?
A-level, IGCSE, all the British curriculums.
Right. Anyway, we were talking, I was interested in creating a new kind of online course, and I was talking to him, and he was coming at it from a whole new angle. I'm coming at it from sort of a college level. He's coming at it from a high school level. And a lot of his focus was on scaffolding, was on sort of helping any sort of student, whether they're like super motivated or whether they just sort of have to take it, whatever sort of level their motivation is, or their background, or their background knowledge, preparation. We want to create a course that would be very difficult to get lost in, but that is also rigorous for the self-motivated student.
I'll just echo that. I think that having a sort of university curriculum with a high school sort of approach in scaffolding and making it accessible is something we've tried to achieve and hope we have.
So that's the synthesis we're going for, sort of 2 different approaches. And so I came up with the core content, and then of course I incorporated and filmed. I went around the country for about 6 months on 2 different trips, just filming, so that every single session, your professor is in a different place, pertinent to that session. And I've been teaching online at several of the colleges and universities that I teach at. I only teach online, and the students really respond well. They'll even work ahead because they want to know where's the professor going to be next time. And so, so I've incorporated all that, but then we incorporated all of his scaffolding, which, he's been working full-time for 8 months on this course. We've been building it for a few years. So that's sort of what we were trying to do. And we wanted to take a multi-pronged approach, create a differentiated course so that, very few and far between would be those students who would be lost or, I hope, feel disengaged. I'm going to share my screen with you guys real quick here. Let's see. There we go. All right. So in our attempt to sort of capture multiple, all these students, the students that take the course are going to have a variety of learning styles, obviously. We want to capture as many of those as we can. And so for those who are visual learners or learn well by reading, we do have what you'd expect in a course, maybe even more than you'd expect in terms of that sort of thing. We do have 400 plus pages of text. I tried to make it very concise and approachable and accessible, but it is a lot. We didn't dumb the course down at all. If anything, if I'm to be honest, this course is actually maybe even a little more rigorous than your average university level course, but we've scaffolded it like a high school course. So I think it really is something special. Anyway, so we do have the text or the textbook, just as you'd expect, but it's broken up with videos, with on-location content. And again, these are not BBC clips or excerpts from a documentary. It's me, it's your professor, it's your teacher in a different place every time.
Yeah, so teaching online, I had to do it in the last school year when COVID hit. We all went online. I think one of the key elements that should be included is your teacher's face. You got to see your teacher's face.
They have to be present and ubiquitous.
So
Yes.
Both of us are present in the course through the videos we produce, and mine are different than his, and we'll get into that. But we think it's important that the students are engaging not just with content, but that we're simulating the sort of face-to-face contact that they would get in a classroom.
Right. We don't want it to have a correspondence course feel. We want it to feel like our course. That's one of the great things about going to college or a really good high school teacher is when you go into the classroom, it's like you're in their classroom. You're taking their course. Their specialization, their special talents are infused in the course. That's sort of what you're paying for and hoping for. Otherwise, just go to the library. So anyway, that's sort of some of our goals here. So we do have the text, and this is just an example. Oops, sorry about that. Of sort of what that text looks like. And of course, we have images and things. And it's broken up sometimes with other scholars' points of view. By the end of this course, you've gotten about 60 different scholars' points of view. And then we break it up with on-location content that is itself edited with some sound effects and graphics and text and things. And we just think that brings up the engagement level just a little bit. But we don't just rely on text. This is not just a glorified textbook. There are those that learn better as audio. They're audio learners. And we wanted to cater the course to adult learners who may not have been as interested in test taking and self-assessments and guided notes and things. They just want to learn more about American history. It's rigorous enough course that we can do that. And a lot of students prefer audio learning too, or they prefer both. They'll read it, they'll study it, and then they want to listen to it again while they're driving to school or whatever. So the entire core part of the course, 30 plus hours, we've recorded it in a studio. And the cool thing about it is just as the text is broken up with on-location videos, the audio is broken up with on-location audio. So you'll be listening and it's studio recorded from the text. And then all of a sudden I'll say something like, let's head over to Nagasaki and examine this further. And we're talking about the bomb. And there I am walking on the streets of Nagasaki. And you can hear the birds in the trees. And it adds a little extra level of engagement. It functions as a break from the studio audio.
I think we hope that students will respond to this because audiobooks and podcasts are such a popular method of learning new material, students and adults, right. That we felt like we could take the textbook and update it, turning it into an audiobook.
Right. It's basically like a big podcast. So you have that option as well. But there are still other types of learners or other types of learning that can supplement what we've done. And so we integrated what we call the structure method into the course as well. We've both used this in our classrooms and at the high school and the college levels with, I think, great success. There are students out there who love, they respond well to making connections or to using their hands. And so that's sort of what we've tried to do here. You'll notice at the end of every session, there's a structure terms section. And it just, at first glance, it looks like these are just mastery terms. I've got the mastery terms, I've got the definitions, but what we're actually asking the students to construct is a structure, an actual physical structure. In fact, and we train them on how to do this, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. We actually 3D printed a structure of 295 terms as cubes with a bunch of different connectors. And in order to connect the cubes, you'll see these cubes, we've got Crusades down there and Conquistadors and the Catholic monarchs and the fall of Granada and Christopher Columbus and the Taino. All these terms, in order to connect them, you have to explain that connection. And so we have the yellow terms that are sort of umbrella terms or foundation terms. And then we have these white terms that might have fewer connections. But by the end of the course, and we supply videos that sort of teach them unit by unit how to build these structures, they'll be building structures that will eventually be almost 300 terms big. This is based on the idea, there was a Jesuit priest named Matteo Ricci, and he was just amazing at remembering things. He was a missionary in India and Southeast Asia and Japan and China. And everywhere he went, he learned the language like a native. And people would ask him, how are you so smart? Like, how are you remembering all this? And according to him, he said in his mind, he had what he called a memory palace. Memory palace. So if he wanted to remember something, that thing, he would put that thing in a specific drawer, in a specific furniture item, in a specific room, on a specific floor of his memory palace.
I don't know if you guys have seen the new Sherlock Holmes. There's a villain that does this. He just kind of sits in his office, files things away. And that's the model. I mean, you can store so much when it's connected within a network, as opposed to just kind of a list.
Right. If you let new information just pile up, which is what I think most students sort of do, they get and history is famous for this. It's an onslaught of all these new names and places and all these new events. And it's very hard to remember, to retain, much less organize. So the whole point of the structure is to teach students how to organize knowledge. As you're picking your foundation terms, you're organizing those connections, how to make connections, and how to retain information. If it's connected to something, you're way more likely to remember it than if it's just piled up in your head. So we go through the structure method as well. And we've both noticed this appeals to the students that maybe the student that would be really excited about building a molecule model or something like that. So we're trying to differentiate the course and appeal to different types of learning and supplement one type with another type, and we hope that it works.
By the way, as we go, there will be time at the end. I don't know if you have questions, but feel free to type them or interact in some way on the screen, and hopefully we can get to questions if there are any.
Right. Finally, I'll just end my little part here with, we do include little summaries at the end. There is a student that responds well to when you boil everything down. We actually have unit previews that boil everything down. They read those that he's prepared. And then they go through, they dive into the topic. And then at the end, it's all boiled down again. And then they'll get it again a little later. So there's a constant reinforcement throughout the course. And then all of this core, I'll talk a little bit more about the videos in a second, but all of this core content is then paired. So we've sort of got a lot of college level content here, but now we're going to pair it with that high school scaffolding. And I'll let Nate describe some of the stuff he's done, which is really, I say unmatched. I'm the one who picked that word because it is amazing what he's been able to do. Anyway.
Well, you guys can be the judge, but let me just take you through the way I've tried to scaffold the course. And there are a lot of pieces here, so I will just try to get to the point on each one. And if you have further questions or if you're interested in the course, we can get more into it at another time. So as an online course, I found that it was a challenge to scaffold online. I don't have face-to-face interaction. I can't read body language. I can't attend to one group instead of another. There are all sorts of reasons it's challenging. So we're trying to make the content, concepts, and skills accessible to whoever is in front of the course. So we approach this in two different ways. For the teachers or course facilitators or parents, we provide a unit plan that is fairly detailed. It's aligned to the Common Core in both history and English. Those are the subjects that I'm licensed in and that I've taught.
We
And-
both come from interdisciplinary backgrounds, and the course is very interdisciplinary.
Right. I find that history and English overlap in so many fundamental ways that it was just important to us to incorporate both. Every guided notes session, every document lesson includes an answer key that could be, if the facilitator allows access, the students could use it as a check for understanding. It could be used to guide a teacher's lecture preparation. It could be used in lots of different ways, but there's an answer key with model answers to everything we ask. And then document lessons with video guidance, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. For the students, we've got guided notes for every session. I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. Daily quizzes with explanations for the answers, whether they're right or wrong. Document lessons, text in written and audio formats, the defined vocab, and the online forums. All right, so I'm going to take a moment to go further into these. This is what the guided notes look like. Every session is different, but this will give you an idea.
So that's a session on the left, the guided notes on the right.
Right, so we've got a session on the Enlightenment. The guided notes really take the students section by section. I think it would be difficult for a student to get lost, but I also think that a student that wants to be challenged will be challenged. It's not scaffolded to the point where the higher level learners are not being challenged. So you can see the headings are the same in the session and in the guided notes. So we hope that it's very clear for a student who doesn't have the advantage of a teacher in front of them all the time. We try to heavily implement and utilize organizers, graphic organizers in different ways. We have lots of different models, different types of graphic organizers. I've found that they're very helpful, not just for ESL students or for students who need more assistance. I think the principles of addressing the needs of the students who need the scaffolding are good for every level of learner. So I wouldn't be, I don't think I would second guess myself to use many of these for adult and high school or college learners, because I think the organization of information is important. So there are lots of different models for what those can look like. Second way I tried to scaffold the guided notes is to provide model answers. So you can see an example has been done for you. Many of the tables, if I'm asking them to do something that seems like in class, this is where I would pause, show them how to do it, ask them to do it with each other before I ask them to do it themselves. This is where I've tried to simulate that level of guidance in a way that can be done virtually with model answers for many of the questions and activities that are challenging. Briefly feature this one. This is just one place where we have the interdisciplinary approach, so that in history, they're also learning rhetoric and logic. I found that teaching logic is one of the quickest ways to improve a student's writing ability for an argumentative paper, because they can't recognize when they're just word vomiting on a page. But as soon as they can organize an argument into a premise and a conclusion, they can see it better. So we've incorporated that into the course in lots of different ways. All right, third thing is kind of a generic heading. I just call it focusing guidance. We try in every session to make it very clear what we're looking for and what the students should be paying attention to. So they are asked at the beginning of every session, before they even start writing or reading, to look at the session objectives and write down what they're supposed to be looking for. And hopefully in that way, simulate what a teacher would do in putting the day's question on the whiteboard or something. And then every section is framed as a question, so that at the end of reading that section or at the end of taking notes on that section, these could be used in different ways, self-assessments for students to ask themselves the question. Teachers could use those questions as sort of oral checks for understanding.
And the organization around questions is, it's very obvious. A student would never miss it. Even if they're listening to the audio, every time there's a new question, there's a little ding and a little pause. It's just obvious that the whole course is organized around questions.
Another example of the focusing guidance, I tried to vary the ways in which I ask them to take notes. So it's not just a bunch of blank pages that ask short answer questions. For example, in this one, you can see on the screen, they've read about Shays' Rebellion in the textbook. Rather than asking them just to record what happened in Shays' Rebellion or answer some kind of comprehension question like that, I've provided 3 different summaries and asked them to make a judgment. So we're going beyond recording information into the level of making judgments. And I think this is an effective way of engaging certainly higher level learners, but also just mixing things up a little bit so that the guided notes are not just constant note-taking. They're also, it could feel like a little puzzle or a game for the student to kind of tease out. And then of course we've got the key, so the student could check their understanding with the way that I read it. Similar thing here, where I've added a layer of scaffolding to the text, because you can see in the organizer, I've got factions across the top and fault lines across the left. This is for the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. The text doesn't organize the information this way. So I've tried to scaffold the information by organizing it for the students. This is one way to read the text. You can see it as factions divided over fault lines. And I've named the factions and the fault lines and given a model answer. So then it's the student's job to kind of look at the text through this lens, and it can help focus and organize the material for them in a way that just doesn't happen if they're just reading through a textbook. All right, and then we try to make connections throughout the course, thematic and conceptual connections, so that content that comes up early comes again later, and we're very explicit about those connections. So this is from the guided notes, where this is from the unit plan, where a teacher can see some of the themes that we're tracking through the course. We try to be very explicit about that.
So if a teacher or parent wanted to just focus on one track, they actually could. You don't have to take the whole thing.
This is an example of a sheet of guided notes where I'm repeating a table that we've already seen in the past in order to kind of tap into background knowledge and ask them to do it again with updated content that they've read in the last chapter. So we try to make connections and explicit reminders to what's come before in the course. And then we've obviously got hyperlinks throughout the course. Anytime content comes up that is explained in another part of the course, students can follow the links to read those sections. And then we've got the structure terms. He showed you the physical model of the blocks that kinesthetic learners could sort of build and find engagement in. You can also do that on paper. This is a really simple model: term on the left, definition in the middle, and a connection on the far right. And the students can organize the terms in any order they want, but the challenge is to make a connection from one term to the next so that the whole session and eventually unit is organized into a network where you could actually tell this story. I use these as oral examinations in my class. Some of the feedback I got from my IB history courses is that the structure terms were the single most effective thing I did in class. So that was nice to hear. All right, and then lastly, answer keys. This is what they look like. It's just, you've got the blank document and then you've got an answer key. Whether the student has access to that or a course facilitator has access to that, we've provided at least our point of view, what we're looking for in all of these.
And you can see it's pretty in-depth. These aren't simple questions and answers. It's pretty rigorous.
So for a document lesson, for example, you can see it's not a traditional rubric, but I've provided some bullet points of what a strong student might suggest or might come up with, what a good answer might look like, and what a weak answer might look like, just based on my experience and based on the way I've designed the lessons. So a teacher, we hope, would have a lot of assistance in implementing this lesson if they chose to do that, because we've got a lot of these materials pre-prepared that I know from my experience, I was constantly frustrated that I didn't have the time I wanted to prepare quality materials. We're trying to remedy some of that.
We've been homeschooling for 8 years. I have 4 kids. And so a lot of the scaffolding he's creating here, it just would have been a dream if we'd had it. And so we're also coming at it from a parent teaching their child in a homeschool situation angle.
Right. So I'm talking about teachers, but it's just any facilitator of the course, whether it's a parent or teacher, or somebody in online school or something. And then let's just briefly cover document lessons, because I know we've hit on them already. Every document lesson has very explicit expectations. There's a focus. We really try to come at this from a literacy standpoint. So it's not a history course that exclusively focuses on the historical narrative, but students could come away with the narrative as well as really good reading skills, which is what we hope a sort of liberal arts or humanities education would give a student. But we don't want them to wait for college to get it. We want it to happen early. So we've got what I think are pretty rigorous literacy expectations built into the guided notes and document lessons. And we try to be very explicit about what those are.
It really goes step by step. By unit 10, they're doing pretty complicated. In fact, they're starting to prepare an actual historical essay.
Right. Very explicit question that comes up again and again in the handout and in the guided video guidance. So it would be very difficult for a student to forget what they're supposed to be doing. Again, we're trying to simulate some of the advantages of a classroom where a teacher would be up there modeling, reminding, redirecting, trying to build some of that into the materials. I'm trying to make a lot of the document lessons very relevant, very contemporary, because we're asking questions that a lot of kids won't care about. They don't care why historical stories change or what Thanksgiving is about. It's just not interesting to many learners. So we want them to see that there is some contemporary relevance to these questions. So with every document lesson that has a historical question, we've said, this is how it applies. And they get these questions up front, and maybe provides them with a framing of the sources and of the question that allows them to approach it thinking in layers, not only what happened then, but why does this matter now? And I think that is an important element for engaging the student by making them see how it relates to them. Difficult vocab is defined. We use lots of different styles for the guided notes. Again, so hopefully not overly repetitive in what we expect and boring students because they kind of know what's coming. We try to use a variety of sources from YouTube videos to 15th century documents to give the students a wide array of exposure to different sources, as well as some contemporary stuff that you know they'll find engaging without a lot of work on our part. All right, so I'm going to give you just a one minute clip from a scaffolded document lesson. This is the video guidance that comes along with the document lesson. So a student would have a handout open on the computer or open in front of them. And then like a teacher in a classroom, I'm trying to take them through the handout in a very step-by-step way. That's the scaffolding, providing model answers. If there are 6 sources, maybe I go through 1, show them how to do it, and then let them do it. And we think that kind of scaffolding and modeling hopefully will take a virtual classroom a level up. So here's just a 1 minute clip of what that might look like.
Who is loyal to the king? Okay, when was the source created? We know it was 1676. And if we actually look at the close of the letter, we can see that this is in June 1676. The same month that Nathaniel Bacon returned to Jamestown with armed colonists and demanded that Berkeley issue him a military commission to fight the American Indians. Where was the source created? Well, this is coming from Virginia, where Sherwood is a lawyer, to England, where Joseph Williamson is the Secretary of State. And does this information make you skeptical or trusting? Okay, now we don't have to be totally confident about whether this information makes us skeptical or trusting, but we should at least be aware of some of its possible implications. We know that we have a person loyal to the crown writing to the crown about a local rebellion. So we can predict, we can guess that based on the point of view of Sherwood, who is loyal to the crown, Nathaniel Bacon will be characterized as something less than heroic. He'll be rebellious. He'll be.
Okay. So our goal in that particular segment is to teach students to look at the source of the information before they read the information. Because in reading the information, they kind of operate on the assumption that everything they read is true. So in history, it's important that we learn to look at source information. So that would just be one of the literacy skills that are, we feel critical to learning in the internet age, particularly. And then in the document lessons, we also get into research. We try to set the stage for writing a research paper so that it is more than a dry sort of classroom exercise. The teacher asked me to write a research paper and then I never think about this stuff again. Try to set the stage by asking what is history and what is it good for? So there's a kind of a framing, a broader perspective on what they're trying to accomplish in writing a research paper. They're never going to study history again. Maybe in that framing, they'll discover that there are other applications to learning to do this kind of work. So we try to frame it before we introduce it. And that happens in lessons 8 and 9. And then what does a good research question look like? We get into in question 10. And that's the end of this course. Course 2, we start in session 11 with finding good sources, citing sources, structuring a research paper, the logic of writing an argument. So it'll be in course 2 where they have a completed historical research paper. But we set the stage for that research in these document lessons. All right, last 2 things, because I know I've been going on for what feels like ages. We have quizzes for every session. So these are basic sort of recall and comprehension quizzes, but we hope there are questions that will challenge students at different levels. The quizzes can be retaken. Right now there are over 400 questions, but we continue to add questions as we work on the sessions. And they get feedback on the answers that they select, whether they were right or wrong. Either I will answer it in my own words, or I will point them to the place in the textbook where they learned this, and then they could read that in the feedback, or they could go back to the text and review the material there.
And you'll notice these quizzes are not, and there's 50-something quizzes. These quizzes are not mill quizzes. They're rigorous. There's all different types of question type, and they're heavy with the feedback. So.
Yeah, I don't like quizzes when you sort of take it and it feels like this came from a computer. It feels like it's very generic. So we tried to make these like there's an author behind them with some intention and objectives. Last thing, unit plans. These are, I utilize the UBD principles, understanding by design. So they come in stages. Stage 1, goals and outcomes. So we've got the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish, and then we plan backwards from there. Assessment evidence, we've got formative and summative assessments. And then the learning plan. So we've done all of this work beforehand, and then we've got the learning plan. We also align each unit to the CLEP for any students, particularly homeschool students probably, who are trying to get college credit that way. And then we align every session or every unit to the Common Core in history and English. We've aligned it to grades 11 and 12, but the plans are hyperlinked, so you could follow and look at it for 9 and 10 as well. They're often very similar. So stage 1 would look something like this: conceptual and historical connections. We've got, for every session after this student or after this unit, students will be able to statements, and then guiding questions for every session. So whether it's a facilitator or a teacher that has access to the unit plan, or the student themselves, we hope this provides another level of focus and scaffolding for each element in the course. And then the assessment evidence in stage 2. This is the way we see it. Others could disagree or organize it differently, but for formative assessments, we see the guided notes and session self-assessments as what a facilitator would use to check for understanding. And then to test comprehension, we would use the document lessons and the structure terms, however you decide to assess the structure terms. And then lastly, every document lesson has a learning plan where it sort of explains guided notes, self-assessments, document lessons, and structure terms for that unit. That's what the Common Core would look like. These are all just little sections cut out. We are providing a packet of materials to anybody interested that will have sample unit plans, sample guided notes pages, sample quizzes, sample document lesson, video and text. So some of this, if you're looking to explore further, you'll have hands-on access to after the webinar.
So awesome scaffolding. Really excited about it. The type of thing I could not have done. Then I just want to end by restating our focus on trying to engage the YouTube generation. This new generation that often learn on a screen. I mean, this whole course is made to engage on the screen, but often requires sort of smaller packets of information at a time, and then some sort of transition or break. Asking students to read for an hour straight, at least in Unit 1, might be more difficult for the YouTube generation. Maybe you disagree. But the main way that we've tried to engage students of this generation is through our on-location mini lectures. And so I just wanted to show a brief, this is 2.5-minute video of just a few little excerpts. You'll notice there's a little fade break. That means we've gone to a different video, just to give you an idea of some of the places we've gone to and what I mean here. So you might want to turn it up.
The ancestral Puebloans, or Anasazi being a Navajo term. When the Navajos showed up in this area, of course, they saw and they came across the ancestral Puebloans' ruins.
Columbus's voyage was filled with uncertainty.
In June 1776, the Second Continental Congress met in this building behind me, right here in Philadelphia. Upon the death of Huayna Capac, the great conquering Inca, the last of the great conquering trio of Sapa Incas, when he died, he left his empire to his son, Huascar. So Huascar was duly recognized as the next great Sapa Inca, and he selects as the best site the Delaware River. Right here, actually, I'm standing in what used to be New Sweden. For almost 20 years, this was New Sweden. So for example, I am standing at the site of an ancient city. It may not look it. You can sort of see one of the great mounds behind me through the woods there. This today is called Poverty Point. 1607, you have the establishment of Jamestown. Jamestown, these guys, they squatted on land right here on the James River. Spanish Florida grew slowly. In fact, this church here, or the remains of it, John Wesley actually preached right here. He preached here several times.
I am standing in a very historic place, as always. I'm in Quebec, in Canada. This is Quebec City, and I'm standing on the plains of Abraham.
Not just that first voyage, but 2 other voyages. He'd spend years here in India, and in 1524, he died of malaria right here in Kochi. In fact, for 15 years, his body was buried right on the other side of this wall where I'm standing. According to mercantilist theory, the world was made up of competing countries, not thousands, millions of competing individuals, but competing countries. So when we speak of China doing this and India doing that and the United States doing this, that's a very mercantilist way of looking at things, sort of a Friedrich Listian way of looking at things, as opposed to maybe an Adam Smithian way of looking at things.
So, like I said, we have 50-ish and counting. And
that's just in the course. There's still the Nomadic Professor YouTube channel that has other videos not exclusive to the course.
And so many of the videos that we've actually prepared will go in future courses. So this course goes from pre-Columbian, the pre-Columbian era up to about 1790, ratification of the Constitution. The next course will go up through the end of the Civil War, and we've already made videos, I mean, just all over the world for the future courses. We must have 20 different Civil War videos, I filmed extensively in Japan and all across Europe and just all over the place, South Korea. But obviously those aren't going to make it into course number 1. But yeah, we're excited. We've gotten very good feedback on from our own students on the mini lecture aspect
And the structure terms aspect.
and the structure terms
The
aspect.
rest of this, tell us what you think.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But that's our course. If you have any questions, let us know. We will be launching this in about 2 weeks. It'll be ready for sale and completely available. We're putting the final touches on the last few audio files. The whole course is, besides the audio files, the whole course is ready to go. But we want to make sure if someone purchases it, we don't want to release it in drip variety. We want them to get the whole package right away. So a couple more weeks and we'll be ready to launch. Any questions or thoughts? Or
We've got a couple questions here. Interested in structure terms, manipulative use. Is there an expectation that students will share structures with you? So these are just optional. So first question is there an expectation that students will share structures with you? So I'll answer this from my point of view. Maybe you have a different answer. I think it's going to depend on who's using the terms. We see these like in a homeschool setting, for example, a parent might use this as an oral exam. You know, sit down and convince me that you know these 10 terms by putting them into a structure. I think it could be used similarly in a classroom. At this moment, we don't have the blocks printed for distribution. So that's a future step. So right now it has to be done on paper, except for the videos we provide as models for how to do it.
although we hope to have them in physical form in a couple months.
I used the paper version of this, you know, where students would organize them in whatever graphical way or in tables or whatever in my classrooms as both assessments and assignments within a unit. And it worked well to check for comprehension and reinforce all of our vocabulary.
You'd be surprised how imaginative students can be with the structure. I don't know about you, but I've gotten all sorts of different structures. I've gotten corkboard structures and poster board structures and video structures and audio structures and report form structures. I've had people build physical structures. So, I mean, I sort of leave it open to the students, but in terms of the question, are they expected to do it? It is built into the course as an integral part of the course. And that is made very manifest from the beginning. So it's not presented as a side option. It's integrated into every session, every unit plan, and we have video help for every session for the building of a structure.
If there are students nerdy enough to have a 3D printer like us, we are willing to give up the printer files. We just haven't been able to produce them fast enough that we could sell them, you know. So
I had no idea, man. It takes a long time.
How you use your structure terms in an assessment. Okay. Sorry, I can't hear you, Allison. Is your
Here we go. Just
There we go.
jumping in, you talked about the paper form. Are you talking about people folding a little cube? Because you showed you're demonstrating something. Or are you talking about people moving slips of paper around? What do you? I'm having a hard time conceptualizing what you mean by the alternate version of using the learning style of engaging with it in space.
So there are a lot of different ways just in 2D to build a structure. And most students in our classes do it this way. So I showed the cubes and sort of put the cube paradigm into your heads. But people build structures on a whiteboard. And the cool thing about that is you can just erase it and then you have to build it again. You might build it a different way. Or they build it on a poster board, or they have a file on their computer and it sort of looks like a mind map, but they have those critical connections. There's no single way to do it.
Yeah, the printed cubes it's sort of like a 3D mind map, and it's a fun manipulable that I think engages students. But for the printed model, I've shared the screen with you so you can see kind of a very basic example where a student has the term, the definition, and then in the last column, they've just given a text description of how that term would connect to the next term. What's the historical connection? Or the conceptual connection? How are these terms related? Why did they come in the same unit? So they could do something like that. I've also used it in a younger class. It was a group of 8th grade history humanities students. I printed all of the terms so they were all cut out. And
A
then,
lot of students do this. They print the terms.
yeah, it was their job then to paste it onto a poster board or whatever paper, and then just hand write the arrows and write one sentence connections from term to term. And we use that as another assessment method.
It's
At the
helpful.
end, you want one organic whole. That's the point. No floaters, no little vacuum packed sections.
Yeah.
Everything's connected. And so that you could, and this is kind of, I've seen the excitement on students' faces when they realize they can explain the connection between the Anasazi and Richard Nixon. You know, they have to go through a bunch of intermediate connections, but they can do it.
Another just brief point on that. I've used this as a, what do you call it? Where you're sort of previewing the material, tapping into background knowledge. You print off all the terms that you haven't covered yet. You cut them out, you put them on the table, and in groups or in whatever way you want to break it up, they have to try to pair or make the connections prior to going through the material. So it worked better in some units than others, but it worked well as a way of getting the students out of their seats, moving around, talking with each other. I don't know what this term means to you. How would I connect this to that? And it worked well as a kind of beginning of the unit pre-test or exercise that can then be repeated at the end of the unit. And it's not hard for students to recognize what they've learned.
In class, I mean, of course, we're talking about an online class here, but when I'm teaching in the classroom, one session every semester is always just a structure session where I bring in magnets and a bunch of markers and then all the terms cut out on poster board. And the students come and we create a huge structure just in whatever the amount of time is, an hour and 20 minutes. And not only does it serve as a great icebreaker, discussion is just way better after that session, but it's a fun intellectual exercise. And they're more likely to build their own structures having modeled it that way.
That's helpful. And I now that I sort of conceive of it as a connection map, which is
Right.
like the term I would use, where I
Right.
get out of the 3D and into 2D, I'm good. Thank you.
We hope that it engages some of the students uniquely, though, that we've built a 3D version. And they're watching us put the blocks together as we're discussing the connections. So that's why we did that.
So Allison, to your tiny question, I'm not sure. I sort of did that unthinkingly. I don't know if we have settled on that as a final numbering system. It may just be that we start over at unit 1. That's to be determined, I guess. We're not finished
that's a
with
good
course
question.
2 yet. So, and maybe we're just trying to hook you, so you have to get both courses, or the numbering system just incomplete. I like the corkboard idea. That might actually be fun. I mean, as a detective exercise, to put up a corkboard,
That is an excellent idea.
pins and string. I can see all sorts of ages getting
Yeah,
into
we
that
blow
kind
it
of
up. I love
detective exercise. Yeah.
that. I love that.
Yeah, I see that as a thing. That's what I've always wanted to do with all the different inventors and different like firearms designs, you know, like how are these things all connected? And like in my mind, I have this giant like wall of it happening, you know, but I've just never been able to do it. So like
Well,
that really hooked me when you were talking about that.
If you started to build it as you're learning it, and you made sure to carefully put on there anything you actually want to retain, and then from time to time you took it apart and build it back up, just to strengthen those neural connections, you're much more likely to just remember it all. It's amazing what we can capture if we're connecting.
So we also, we have the packet we'll give you with sample materials. We will have a Teachers Pay Teachers store if anybody's interested or uses that resource, so that, you know, little
You don't have to buy the whole thing. You can just get a little.
resources can be, you know, you can get resources at a really targeted level if you're just looking for a particular session or document lesson or whatever. So we I guess if you're interested, we need a way to be able to announce that this stuff is ready, because our store is not quite ready, and
We're about 2 weeks out.
yeah, we're about 2 weeks out from a sort of official launch. So that's where we're at.
Thank you for coming, by the way. We appreciate the two of you who showed up.
3, even though
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of them
3,
is
of course,
obligated
of course.
to be here.
Furman counts.
No, you know what I was thinking, like, I was thinking particularly like with even with like my fifth grade teachers. So my social studies teachers or teachers, fifth grade teachers, sometimes, depending on the year, they would be assigned to teach math one year. Another year they'd be teaching science or whatever.
Right.
When they get to social studies, which is US history, um, they're all over the map, you know? So I might have some fifth grade teachers who have taught US history for a number of years, and then I would have a teacher who have never taught US history in his or her life. And I was just thinking, not only would this be great for, students, but it might be great for professional development.
Yes.
Teachers who need like the content and thinking about how they would be able to deliver content to something that they haven't taught in a long time or they've never taught at all. So I was wondering if you were thinking about having another like component where it's really for teachers to, because I think it's just a great, interesting way for teachers to learn the content if they haven't taught it before, but they're thrust into the classroom and like, okay, here it is.
So you mean something other than going through the full course, like some kind of professional development package or
Maybe like them
course?
both, like even like a course for teachers learning US history.
Well, I've noticed when I talk to high school teachers, the training they tend to want the most isn't how to teach training, because they've gotten all that. They've gotten their fill of that, and they always do.
And we learn on our feet in the classroom.
Right.
Me and my peers were always like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I need
It's content training. Yeah, that's what they want.
Know this
They
stuff.
want content training. So a really good scaffolded course that is not just it's content training, but also it's filled with ideas for how to teach in the classroom as well, because it's scaffolded for high school learning. Could be really useful. I agree.
So we sort of see the course itself as what you're talking about. It's something a teacher could take for professional development. If you have something particular, some way it could be edited to be more directed toward teachers, did you have something else in mind?
No, directed towards teachers, for teachers who are looking for content. And then also not just getting content, but in terms of how do you translate it from what you're learning and how do you design it for students, because for the teacher, it's not just getting the content, but how do you deliver it to a fifth grade? How do you deliver it to an eighth grade? How do you deliver it? So I like how you present like the scaffolding, because it serves as a model in terms of, then they might say, okay, I'm going to try this, so it's kind of like a twofer,
And of course, if you have the course too, if you're a teacher, you now have all the links to all the videos. These are, I throw in several mini lectures that are freely available on my YouTube channel, but most of the videos are exclusive to the course. And of course, once you have the course, if you want to break up your lecture with a little 4-minute, let's go to the James River, you have access to all those videos.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah, the organizational structure is real. I was just thinking about that, like when I was actually teaching high school, like, whoa, could have used that just to like be like, well, how do you get all this into package it up? Oh man.
Well, it does force you, you said package it up. It does force you to do that. That's one of the things about history. It's just such an onslaught of info. The structure forces you to organize it, pick out things and organize it in a way that you normally wouldn't. And really, you have to do that. At some point, if you want to remember it, you have to do that.
I found it really hard. I taught in public and charter schools as well as international schools. And especially the public and charter, they just said, teach US history. Here are the standards, now get there. It was very difficult to be a curriculum developer and a teacher simultaneously. So I get what you mean. Like with a framework, you can make decisions, but with no framework, you're just scrambling for content. So we have had that in mind and hoped to provide at least a beginning structure. And it's 50 sessions. You might not get through that in a semester or whatever, but a teacher can say, I'm not doing unit 10, I'm not doing unit 7 and 8, but the rest has clear connections. So we hope it's flexible in that way.
One thought I have, thinking, building on Gorman's idea, is that I don't know what your model is in terms of selling this as text, but you might consider proposing to districts to offer to come in and do PD for people who are newly assigned to history, and having as part of the negotiated contract that the teachers get access to the to your book, but that you also come and do a PD, whether we're still in virtual land or live, to talk through the thinking that you're doing, like you're doing in this workshop, about it as a sort of educator to educator conversation, and offer yourselves as a resource. And I do think I've been working with a K-5 curriculum, that History's Mysteries, that was developed by 2 teachers. In some ways a similar, it's a very different scale and type of product, but it's similarly designed to be almost self-teaching, in the sense that a teacher who teaches it also gets professional development in teaching kindergarten through 5th graders inquiry and designing things around primary sources. They don't need to feel like they're confident in the content in order to adopt the curriculum. They can take the curriculum, teach the curriculum, and by teaching the curriculum, get more confident.
That is exactly what we're
content and the curriculum. And that's at the high school level. I see you doing a very comparable thing. So this is not History's Mysteries High School, but this is, your own cool, you have your own nomadic angle on it, but you also potentially, you have an audience, not just as the people who are adopting text, but people who are trying to support teachers in a tough time. And the number of people who come to the workshops we deliver who say, I thought I was teaching, up until a week ago, I was going to be teaching geography, but, we had a departure and now I'm going to cover, US 1 or US 2 or something different. And so I think that there's a real desire in the part of schools to support teachers who are stretching into new roles and new places, often at the last minute.
I like that, as a high school educator who has been in that position of surprise, you're teaching something you don't know anything about, or just needing this kind of resource. I like that idea and suggestion. Any other questions or thoughts?
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I put my, I don't know, I'll put my email in the chat. So if you guys have, when you're doing this stuff, I'd like to be included in whether information that you send out. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, well, it was just exciting just to see, just thinking about like what I'm trying to, even like what we're trying to do with like things on the museum floor, just like like the concept of what you're talking about is I got really excited. So it's pretty neat. So I'd like to explore what you have going on.
Awesome. I'll send you a notification for sure.
Yeah.
So expect that in a couple weeks.
So
yeah,
I don't know, like I have a list of emails of people that signed up for this, which happens to be much longer than the people who showed up.
It was a decent sized group.
Should I use that in the future, or assume that when we're launching, is that an audience that I can share with?
Is it appropriate for us to send that notification out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll take this recording. We'll be putting it on our website, and we'll just resend it out to that existing list. But then we're going to also just invite other teachers to register and watch this recording, and then, we can think about, like I said, if you guys want to do like a follow-up later in the year, we can do that too.
Okay.
Well, thanks
Great.
again, and thanks for your ideas.
Yeah, thank you.
Really great.
Yeah, from the high school angle, the PD idea is fun.
Yeah.
So we will get you the packet of free or sample materials soon, and then a follow-up email later when the course is officially ready.
All right, sounds great.
All right.
This is great, guys. Really appreciate it.
Good to meet
Yeah.
you.
It looks like a huge labor of love, and it's
Yes,
looks
it
really
really was.
exciting.
Yeah,
All right, see ya.
thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good to
Bye.
see you, Allison.
Good to see you, Scott.